I am Daniel Lucas, and welcome to After Cafe, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He is a Cialdini certified trainer in ethical persuasion and, of course, author of the book How to Hear Yes More Often and teaching professionals to be ethical, more persuasive, and using behavioral science, none other than Mr. Patrick Vanderburg. Welcome, Mr. Patrick. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Yeah, no, I think you've got it all, Daniel. Thank you very much for inviting me on your show. I teach people how to be ethically more persuasive, as you said, so they hear yes more often. It's often the case that when we make requests of someone else, and this doesn't have to be sales related. It is whenever we're trying to achieve a goal, whenever we need someone to adopt our way of thinking. It could be your children needing to clean up their room. It could be suggesting the family holiday destination. It could be sales. It could be advertising. It could be marketing. We rely on our persuasiveness, our ability to convince others about what it is we're proposing. And the fact is that if you don't know the science, you will sit there thinking about rational reasons why the other party should, accept what it is you have to say, and you get a certain amount of yeses. But when you use the science and you actually make it easier for people to make a yes decision, you get a lot more yeses. And so, those are lost if we don't know the science. And for the longest time, I've been really excited about how potent and how powerful this works, but it also works best when used ethically. And so, yeah, all good things. And so I've been teaching that for a long time, which I love to do.
Mr. Patrick Vanderbilt, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Hoping for more and more empowering books like this to come. How to hear yes more often. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, when it comes to persuasion science, Dr. Cialdini wrote a book that's very famous. It's called Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. And it is considered by many top CEOs to be the best business book of all time. It was written 40 years ago, the original version, but consistently it's still turning up at the number one position of timeless reads for business. But as exciting and wonderful book it is, and I think your audience should definitely own a copy. It talks about the theory, it talks a lot about the research, it talks a lot about how to defend yourself against people using this on you unethically. But it is less so about actually how to implement this in practice. And so, myself and a number of my colleagues who are also Cialdini certified trainers, we got together and we thought, well, we could write a book, not to compete with Dr. Cialdini's book, because he's got everything nicely in there. We will focus on the practical application. So, each author has a chapter, and in there, we take a different angle from, okay, how do we now apply this in practice? So, in my chapter, I highlight the situation that happened to me. Basically, the first case where I had to use the science of persuasion to save the day, which it did beautifully. This was business related. And so I describe and dissect that whole process, how that works, so that people can learn from that experience, looking at their own challenges, where some of the other authors have taken different angles. Leopold Ajami from the United Arab Emirates. He goes into how to use it in a presentation setting. Where Martin John from the UK, he talks not about sales related, he talks about procurement. So every chapter sort of gives a different angle, different look on practical application.
Mr. Patrick, the title is fantastic. Before we dive in, what's the most common misconception people have about ethical persuasion that you wanted to address with this book?
Um, I guess a common misconception is that as soon as people hear the word persuasion, they often think manipulation. And then, hang on, I don't want to do that. But persuasion science can be used ethically and unethically. And so research shows that unethical use may produce short term success, but it is long term disaster because our trading partners, the people we're dealing with, they don't tend to come back to us when we've lied and cheated them into agreement, right? They don't come back. Where research does show that if we use this in an ethical manner, it strengthens relationships, it makes more loyal relationships, and it produces success in the short term and in the long term. So we definitely want to use this in an ethical way.
You frame influence as a way to hear yes more often. Can you share a story, a time you heard no and using these principles were able to reframe into a yes?
Okay, so maybe it would be beneficial for your audience if we dived into a particular aspect of persuasion, which has to do with the principle of reciprocity. We all know the word reciprocity, right? If somebody does something nice to you, then you need to do something nice in return, right? If I invite you to my birthday party, well, then you should invite me to yours. If I do you a favor, then you owe me a favor, right? And so the reason that reciprocity works for us, and it's actually an awesome thing that we have that in our societies, is that as from when we were children, we've always been taught to not take without giving in return, right? We got nasty names for people who who take without giving in return. And so we go to great lengths to make sure that we reciprocate kind behavior. And it can last a long time, actually. If you do somebody a favor, it could be years down the track that they still have that feeling that, oh, you were good to me, and I don't want you to feel like I'm a taker, right? So I remember, and when the opportunity presents itself, right, I will repay that favor. And we often repay it extra, right? Because we want to make absolutely sure that the other party feels that we've adequately reciprocated. And that's awesome that we have that in societies because it makes it possible for us to give something to another person without actually giving it away, which is, it's just a circulation of resources, really, which is great. And so the rule of reciprocity is that we are trained to give back the same type of behavior that was first given to us. And so in business, that's often taken as in, okay, so we got to give stuff to people, right? And that's sort of true, or that is true, but it is often misunderstood in business. Before I answer your question, I might take a little sidetrack here. I'm sure you've been on a website and they have, let's say, a downloadable ebook. Right, in business we call that a lead generator. Right, we make something available that's of value, that people can have at no charge, but in return we capture their name and their email address, so we have a direct line of communication. You can contact them and market to them. So it's called a lead generator. And so a lot of businesses think that, well, we'll make that ebooks, beautiful ebook, right? Lots of valuable information. We'll make that available for free. That's our gift, right? And so we'll use that as a lead generator. And it says on their website, right? Our gift to you, right? Just put your name and your email address in, and we'll send you the download link. Our gift to you. Nice try, but that's not a gift. A gift is something that's given without a requirement having to be met. And in case of the ebook, it was giving you your name and your email address first, and then you get the download link. right? So it wasn't a gift, there was a condition, so therefore it was a reward. And it's interesting to note that rewards do have their place, but they're far less effective than gifts. And rewards end a relationship or a transaction where a gift starts it. So businesses often completely miss the boat, as in they think they're activating reciprocity, but they're actually getting it completely wrong. And so that's a lot of effort wasted. Also, promotional gifts, things with your company's name and address and that sort of stuff on it, that's not a gift either, right? That's advertising. But anyway, so you asked about, when somebody gives you a no. So it turns out that there is a moment of power after someone says no to you. What you do in that moment is crucial. So when I make a proposal to you, I have a standpoint. And if you don't agree with that, then you say no to me, right? And so you have another standpoint somewhere else. If I now make a concession to you, right? I move from my initial position to a more moderate one. That is a behavior, right? I'm giving you a behavior. I'm making a concession to you. If you live up to the rule of reciprocity that states that we want to give back the same type of behavior that was first given to us, well, that means that you would make a concession to me, right? And so we typically meet halfway. And so when it comes to making suggestions to someone, we need to realize that there is this moment of power after no. So if you turn up just with one suggestion or one request or one option of your proposal, and if they say no, that's the end of the discussion and you're finished, then you'll never be able to use that moment of power after no. So what Dr. Cialdini likes to call sleuths of influence, or most of us say detectives of influence, we come prepared, right? We, at a minimum, we have two options to present to people. And so you could retreat to a smaller request. And let's make this a bit of a fun example. So let's think of our teenage children, right? We would like them to do their homework this weekend and clean up their room, right? Not a big ask, but yeah, often you ask that of a teenager, you witness a small explosion, right? Oh, I've got other things planned, and how am I supposed to fit all that in, right? And so you get resistance. Okay, so if I come in and I just ask, clean your room and do your homework, I'm expecting some resistance. But I could ethically and genuinely think, well, I mean, that's the minimum they should do this weekend. But seriously, I mean, we're all having to contribute in this household, right? I mean, I've washed the car so many times, and let's say my son in this scenario example could wash the car, one time this year. The lawns, really, we could share turns in mowing the lawn, and really window washing is not a difficult thing. Why does one person always have to do that? So it's not out of the realm of being realistic for me to walk into the teenager's room and go, hey, listen, you've had a little bit of a sweet go the last few months, but now this weekend it's time to pull your finger out. This weekend, I'd like you to wash the car, mow the lawn, do the windows, do your homework, and clean up your room. Now, in that moment, you're going to witness a slightly larger explosion. What? Right? And all this pushback. But then if you said, okay, well, if you can't do that, how about you just do your homework and clean up your room? Not only does contrast help us to make the experience of that same request is now smaller, so it seems like less work than it actually is because I first asked you for a larger request, but also because I asked you to do something large first. You said no, you resisted, and then I retreated to a smaller request. You feel an inclination to want to agree with that request. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, Mr. Patrick. So, as an author and as trainer, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
I've always, as soon as I learned about ethical persuasion, I've realized that you know people in business we invest a lot, right? We put a we often take savings and invest that in trying to start a business, and then when this business is running and we're successful, as in we're turning a profit, um, we're not going bankrupt, right? That's great, but we put a lot of effort in. We take a lot of risks. Our personal finances are often on the line, and once you start getting employees, they have families. They depend on your success, and their families depend on your success. And so, of course, knowing the science of persuasion, which sounds difficult, and it's not really. They're pretty. I mean, give back the same type of behavior you first get. Right, the rule of reciprocity. It's easy enough to understand. It's rocket science, but it's not. It's not
Hmm.
difficult rocket science. Um, so I realized that if you don't use the science, then you're going to be wasting time. You're going to be wasting resources. You're going to waste success that you could have had. um, you're going to waste competitive advantage you could have had. And I think that's incredibly unfair for people in business to go at it very in an inefficient way. It's such a waste of time and energy when those yeses were really there on the table, and in a way that we can communicate that's ethical, and it strengthens relationships. So I've always been passionate about sharing this with people and enabling people to do that. And sometimes, I mean, yeah, to learn this stuff, it doesn't take years, right? But it does take more than a podcast, and it does take more than reading a book, right? If we do training, for example, on Dr. Cialdini's flagship course, which comes with live training from one of our certified trainers. You can do that over about 8 weeks. It's about a 20-hour investment. So it's not, a massive investment in terms of time. But sometimes I share just single little nuggets of persuasion gold, let's say, like we just did with that moment after no, right? If you have one of your listeners listening to this and they think, well, you know what? When I go in and I give somebody a proposal, I just give them the one proposal. And then if they say no, I'm out. Well, maybe you should make a larger, more comprehensive proposal and your normal proposal, and start with one and then show them the other if they say no, right? Other people might say, well, I do always prepare two proposals or three, and I present all three at the same time, and then I let them pick them, right? Which is, if you present it in the right order, it could help you that you got three proposals, but there's no reciprocation of concessions. So you don't get that moment of power after no. And so you can be wasting that, right? And have, significant losses of time and resources going forward. So yeah, I've always been passionate about sharing this with people to, enable them to reach their goals faster, waste less time, be more successful, or not really more successful, just being as successful as they were always supposed to be. And it just takes a little bit of science, right? We don't expect a chemist to do a great job making our medication without knowing the science. We don't expect a pilot to do a great job interpreting the weather and landing the aircraft if they didn't know the science. And we wouldn't expect an architect to design a skyscraper very well and for it to last very long if he didn't know the science. Yet in business, we are at it every single day without knowing the science, and it's costing us every single day. And that's what we hope to wake people up to with this book and with the training that we give to people.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Patrick, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be a trainer as well as an author like you?
To be a trainer, yeah, contact myself. I can put you in contact with the right people at the Cialdini Institute. We've always got courses coming up, and we do need a lot more trainers. The World Economic Forum does a report every 2 years. It's called the Future of Jobs, and in there 2 years ago, they highlighted that leadership and social influence, which is another word for ethical persuasion, was the fourth highest priority for businesses to focus on 2 years ago. Last January, they increased it to position number three, because in a world where we're now dealing with AI, which is making things a lot more uncertain, it is our interpersonal skills that are becoming more and more important. And so that's where ethical persuasion comes in as well. So, yeah, we need a lot more trainers and to make this training more accessible. So, yeah, that's certainly a good idea. But if people want to learn for themselves, I can even give some free sort of training materials if you like. If people, and I don't know if you can put that in the show notes with a link. Otherwise, if people go to my website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au, in the menu bar, you'll see free, and there's a section there where you can get a downloadable ebook. Now, not like I said before, you don't have to put your name in or your email address. It's just a right click and download. It's yours to have, and it goes in a lot more detail. And we just really touched on one principle. There's 7 of those, and there's many subtle nuances. So please help yourself. Go get that download book and enjoy. If you like, there's also a 7-day influence challenge. For that, you do need to put your name and your email address in, and then we send you an email every day, about 7 minutes reading of, again, a deeper insight in persuasion science that you'll be able to use. And that's a nice way to test it out. And if you've got success with it, which you'll likely will have, it's a signal that you should learn this properly, and do some training, and we can help you with that if you like.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. Patrick. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yeah, well, I have to always. I'll show you for those watching on the video. This is my copy of Influence from Dr. Cialdini. I don't know if you can see that, the amount of tags I have in there. That's the research and the case studies and all the fascinating stuff. And often we have discussions online that it doesn't matter how often you dive back into that book, the more your understanding grows, you get more from rereading passages or a paragraph. So I think Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, should absolutely be on your bookshelf, or an audio book. Also awesome to just listen to it. Then Dr. Cialdini also has the book Persuasion, which is what do you do before you try to influence people. So yeah, so those would be two wonderful books for people to have.
Thank you for that recommended books, Mr. Patrick. And how do you recommend someone practice these skills in a low stakes environment to build their confidence?
How would you do this? Well, there's a good thing to realize that just being a nice person, an interested person, helps you a lot to be more persuasive, right? With reciprocity, for example, if you ask the question, how can I genuinely help this person? Not from a point of view of what can I do so they repay me something else bigger back, right? How can I help this person? You will be building that energy of reciprocity between you, which will find its way back to you sooner or later. So that helps. Just being interested in someone. If you're going to have a meeting with someone, research, and it's more easier than it's ever been before, right? Because everybody has social media feeds, right? Go in and try and find out what those people are interested in. And especially look if there's things that you can appreciate about them, and look for things that you have in common. And when you have a meeting, resist the temptation to go straight into business. You should spend, and on a first meeting, 10 to 15 minutes discussing or bringing up similarities, things that you have in common. Oh, you like riding motorcycles? So do I. What bike have you got? When have you last been out? Right? When we uncover similarities between each other, we like each other more, which is the principle of liking. And if you can, often people say, well, to build a relationship, a strong relationship, that must take months or years, right? But that's the logical part of your brain talking. The intuitive part of your brain can form a bond in as little as 15 minutes. And a great way to do that is to look for similarities and talk about those. So that will be two very easy things for your listeners to start off with. Look at how you can genuinely help the other party, and what can I find out about them? What can I appreciate about them? And tell them that, pay them a compliment, and bring those similarities up in conversation. And that alone will already have a big impact on you building relationships.
Mr. Patrick, if someone could only take away one single actionable piece of advice from your entire book, what would you want it be?
I guess in terms of realizations, and I'm repeating myself a little bit, and I apologize for that, but we have to realize that there is a science to how people make decisions. Nearly 100 years worth of science, and that's an important skill, to have just in life, because it works business related and privately. Um, but in business, it's an absolute must when your livelihood depends on getting agreement from other people. And it's not that you're turning people that don't want it into people that do want it. What often happens is that when we give people information that's logical and rational, and I know there's a bit of a hype about storytelling, which is great because it makes things memorable, but in itself, it's not a decision trigger. And so when we give people logical reasons why they should listen to us, why they should accept our proposal, we're actually overloading that logical part of the brain, and people decide not to make a decision. They push back from you and your wonderful proposal. And so you experience that as a no, but it wasn't actually a no, it was indecision. It could have been a yes, but you got silence. And so you're not changing people's minds, you're just making it easier for people to make a decision. So yeah, the biggest realization is that there is a science to how people make decisions. And if you in your life or in your business depend on getting people to be convinced to go along with what it is you're proposing, then you must know this science. Otherwise, you'll be losing time and resources every single day.
Mr. Patrick, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast, Law 101 and Mental Health 101, Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Patrick, finally, what's the next yes you're hoping to hear for yourself and your work? What is the next big project or goal you're applying these principles to?
Thank you for asking, actually. I have a community project that I wouldn't mind your listeners to help me with. Um, it's exciting to learn what we teach when you're in the middle of your career, because all of a sudden you're getting successes that you weren't having before. Of course, you also realize that, oh my goodness, I should have learned this earlier, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so reflecting on that, I think it is painful to realize that we have young adults coming to the final year of their school or their university, and they're going to enter the workforce. They're going to try and enter the workforce by writing a job application without knowing how to be persuasive. Then, if they even get invited, they're going to go to a job interview without knowing how to be persuasive. And goodness, if they get hired, they're going to have wage negotiations without knowing how to be persuasive. And so, given that persuasion is such an in demand and much recommended skill to develop, I've taken it as my sort of community project to make myself available for schools and universities, let's say, young adults ages 15 and up, to introduce them to this subject. So if you are a parent and you're on, let's say, a parent committee at your school, schools are very busy, right? And so to put something in their lap and say, hey, I can do this for you, it's not always, jumped at. So if a request comes from the parent committee, as in say, hey, this is an important skill, can we as a school spend some time on here? And oh, by the way, there's this guy Patrick who would be willing to contribute. I'd welcome that. I'll as long as I'm able, I'll donate some of my time to do a presentation where we can dive into the principles so they understand how this works, and give them some tips on how to actually use this from a job hunting and interview related sort of scenario, so they have a bigger chance of actually landing that dream job that they were hoping for. Because if they don't, I mean, seriously, the entire trajectory of their life will be changed from that moment. And I think that's a valuable thing to fight for, to give them that best opportunity. So I'll be delighted to introduce them to the topic.
Mr. Patrick Vanderburg, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your book, your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Thank you very much.
So where do people reach you, Mr. Patrick?
The website, ethicalpersuasion.com.au. And of course, I'm also on LinkedIn, the same company name, Ethical Persuasion, or you can find my name, Patrick Vanderburg, and all the other social media channels as well.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Patrick Vanderburg, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering advocacy to come, and for sure, more and more empowering yes to come. So, Mr. Patrick, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
More to come, people. See you soon.